Good afternoon, everyone. It's now 4 o'clock, so we're going to be beginning our meeting. For November 29th, Board of Police Commissioners, Halifax Regional Municipality. I'd like to do the land acknowledgement of Mi'kmaq land. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in the territory and recognizes that we're all treaty people. Are there any community announcements? No community announcements, but I would like to recognize that today, between November 25th and December 10th, is 2 weeks of activism to end intimate partner violence. I'm wearing a purple ribbon today. If you happen to see a purple ribbon around, that's what it's about. We have 11 shelters for women across the across Nova Scotia, and they're maxed to capacity. This is still an ongoing issue, a concern for women and safety, and other genders as well. So I just hope that you will acknowledge that and maybe put your thought to sharing some conversations with people you know around it. We don't have any minutes to approve. The approval of the order of business and approval of additions or deletions. We have one item that we need to have a deletion on, which is an item of 7.1 from Commissioner Critchley, Mental Health and Policing. Commissioner Critchley, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Kent. I'm fine to delete that motion. The intent of the motion was captured in the motion passed last meeting, so I'm very happy that Commissioner Blackburn put forward that motion. It's a great initiative, something that I'm hopeful we'll see some movement on soon.
Thank you. So do we need a motion for that? Motion for deletion?
We need a motion to approve the amended
Okay,
agenda.
so are there any further additions or deletions? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the order of amended order of business? So moved by Commissioner Giles, a seconder. My head. Okay. Commissioner Smith, I'm going to go with that. All in favor say aye. Aye. Nay. Motion is carried. Is there any business arising out of the minutes, Madam Clerk?
No, Chair Kent.
Okay. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none, we have consideration for business, none. We note that we've already deleted 7.1. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Is there any correspondence?
Chair Kent, there was no correspondence or petitions received by the clerk's office for this meeting.
Thank
Sorry, there was correspondence received for item 10.1.2 and no petitions.
Thank you. Are there any petitions from commissioners? Nope, hearing none, move forward. And there are no presentations with the exception of that's in the agenda items. And with that, we will now move on to reports and discussion. We have a presentation that will be done by the CFO. And by the way, CFO is sitting here and he is replacing our CAO this evening, but he'll exit the chair and go and do the presentation, I think, or you have staff that are going to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We got finance staff here,
Okay.
David Harley and Tyler Higgins, to do the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead. Just a note for members, Commissioner Blackburn is on her way. She got tied up in some traffic. She has seen much of this presentation, so she's not missing anything. And as soon as she gets here, she'll join us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dave Harley. I'm the Director of Accounting and Financial Reporting for HRM, and I'm just going to give you a brief financial update similar to what Jerry presented yesterday to the Budget Committee for HRM. So to start with, HRM, in compiling our initial budget, look for the municipality as a whole. We've met with the different business units of the municipality and compiled the pressures that the various business units are working towards and working through this for the upcoming fiscal year. And in doing so, we had identified a $105 million funding gap for the upcoming fiscal year. We've broken that $105 million gap into some of the bigger areas, as you can see based on this pie chart. The largest portions of this are really compensation changes driven by the various collective agreements of the municipality, as well as capital servicing charges. So the capital servicing, that's what we tend to refer to as capital from operating. And it's the portion of our capital budget that's really not eligible to be funded by debt, and therefore is defaulted to funding from our from our operating budget each year. So we've broken out the $105 million shortfall into these various groups. There's capital servicing, transfer tax, debt servicing, compensation, contractual increases, inflationary adjustments, as well as some public safety and social improvement pieces that are being looked to be done in the next year. So in looking at this $105 million shortfall, it's worthy noting that there's 5 items that are driving approximately 75% of that shortfall. As I mentioned before, our capital from operating costs, restoring them to some council-approved guidelines that we've had in place for the past couple of years. The increase in compensation. We have seen a decrease in our transfer tax over where we have been, and I'll get to that a little bit later to provide a little bit more context as to what that is. We have another $7.5 million in contractual increases, as well as an increase in our principal and interest costs for our debt servicing of $6 million. And in looking at this $105 million shortfall, it is worth noting that a lot of these costs are really non-controllable. They're not costs that we really have the ability to do much about. The compensation changes, they're driven by our contractual agreements with our collective agreements. That transfer tax is a decrease in our revenue stream caused by the weakening in the real estate market. The contractual costs and the inflationary costs are both driven by contractuals, got some living wage portions in it. Inflationary, that's the increases we see in things like utilities costs and the like. The other side of that, roughly half that cost, is partially controllable. And I say partially because there are portions within those, the cap from operating is controllable. The public safety and the social improvements pieces have portions that are not controllable. So they are either contractual obligations or inflationary pressures. So we really don't have the ability to offset those costs. One of the key pressures that's affecting the municipality is the growth in the population that we've seen over the past couple of years. So the way that works is the growth in the population really is a good proxy for the increase in pressure on the municipality to provide services. So the more residents we have in the city, the more services that are required to give them. On the flip side of that, we have our increase in dwelling units. So our dwelling units is really what's driving our ability to increase our our property tax income. So without actually having to increase the rate, if you have increasing number of dwelling units, you'll increase your tax base that way. You can see back in 2015-16, we actually were in a fairly neutral position in terms of those growth levels. But since then, we've actually been lagging behind the population growth with our dwelling unit growth. And that's been putting systemic pressure on the municipality to raise those taxes to the level that's needed to maintain those services. So looking at some of the buckets that we'd identified earlier in that pie chart, one of them we called out was social increases. Including this, we have some living wage contracts. We have contracts with living wage increases built into them. So as the living wage increases in the municipality, those contracts naturally increase in cost, and they're driving that up about $2.6 million. We have another $2.4 million in our Moving Forward Together plan and other transit improvements that are planned. We have $1 million of cost with the suburban plan and cultural priorities plans. Another $1.3 million in events, as well as several smaller increases that are tied into this total increase that we're looking for in the social grouping that we've identified. For public safety, we have an increase of $2.6 million in the RCMP contractual costs. Of note on there, that's an HRM estimate of what those cost increases are going to be. We don't actually have a finalized number from that. That will be decided by the Treasury Board as the budget works its way through there. And at that point, we'll be able to get a finalized number of what that increase is. We have another, the $1.4 million that HRP has included as their increase for their service increase, their service enhancements. We have that as built into that $105 million shortfall. That is pending Board of Police Commissioners. So that number has the potential to change, but we have that included in that number there. We have another $1.3 million in increased Halifax Fire positions. We have supplies for both HRP and Halifax Fire and other non-compensation costs that are required to increase so that we have appropriate levels of supplies for those folks. We are looking to increase the volunteer honorarium for volunteer firefighters by $1.5 million. Fleet enhancements are required, especially around maintenance. So that's a $1.2 million increase. And then we have various public safety projects and plans that are in place that are going to be another $1.1 million, as well as, again, some other various costs throughout the organization. In terms of the inflationary pressures we're seeing, there's $2.8 million in utility increases, and we have fuel increases as well. $1.3 million in transit pressures, fleet inflation, so fuel consumption, maintenance and repairs. It's another almost $1 million. And then again, various costs throughout different parts of the organization are all experiencing those pressures. So that continues to drive up that inflationary pressure we're seeing. So I spoke briefly about the D-transfer tax decline. What we can see here is kind of a table showing the last several years of our actual D-transfer tax revenues. So all the way through from 2016 up to 21-22, you can see that that was a fairly steady increase in those revenues, and fairly sizable in some of those years. A lot of the surpluses that the municipality had experienced over that time were driven by this D-transfer tax. And once we hit that 21-22, we can see it peaked and it's starting to trend down. Good news is we're expecting that decrease to start leveling off in the next year or so. But at this point in time, we're looking at another $11 million decrease potentially, and that's kind of what's driving some of that pressure on our overall budget. So in terms of the steps to mitigate some of the pressure, so that $105 million shortfall, that would have required a 15.2% increase in our taxable revenues. So what we've actually done to offset some of this is we looked at the capital from operating that was done. We were looking to bring it back up to the original guidelines. We understand, we can see that our spending has not actually reached those guideline levels, so we're comfortable with a $30 million reduction of that capital from operating budget in the upcoming year as a way to bring that down, our overall increase down. And at the same time, we were looking at throttling back some funding into our strategic initiative reserves by another $7 million. That $37 million decrease from that $105 million, that's going to bring us to the 9.7% increase that was presented to the Budget Committee yesterday. And that's really our quick financial update that we wanted to provide to the board here. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dave. Are there any questions of clarification? This is for staff. Commissioner Giles? The debate will come later, right?
Thanks very much for the presentation, sir. I'm just wondering, are you and your budget confrères familiar with the rule of 70?
Are we speaking of the rule of 70 in regards to our capital?
Well, it could be capital, it could be operating, it could be any expenditure. But the rule of 70 goes roughly like this. If you take an increase and divide it into 70, the product is the number of years that it will take before the increase produces doubling of the initial result. So call it 10% because we're all friends here, so we can say 10% instead of 9.7%. Divided into 70, in 7 years, taxes will double. Is there any perception by anyone in a responsible position that that kind of increase is sustainable? Because many of the things that you talked about don't seem to me to be one-time line items. They seem to be budget items that may continue a long time into the future.
Well, yes, you are correct. So a lot of those items are not one-time increases. Well, I wouldn't say a 10% increase year over year would be sustainable. What we're actually looking for would not be a 10% increase this year followed by another 10% increase next year. What you would see is a 10% increase this year, which would reset our baseline for the next year. And we'd look to see what we would actually have to build on top of that in the following year in terms of what we would require for a budget to continue with those pressures. One of the things I showed was the slide of the population growth versus the increase in our dwelling units. One thing to note on that slide is those two lines are beginning to converge again. So as that population has grown, as we continue to see new builds go on within the municipality, and they are continuing to grow, there's a significant number of those that are out there permitted but not yet built. So as that continues to grow, that increases our tax base. We're also seeing increases in our assessment base, which offsets a lot of that of the requirement for the tax rate increase. So that increase is based on the increase in our assessments, as well as increase in the number of dwelling units, will help offset a lot of those costs in the future. So we're not looking for that 10% increase year over year. Year over year over year. We're looking for a 10% increase in this current year, and then we'll reset that baseline and come back at the next year with an increase that would be required to do those costs in the upcoming year. So we're offsetting some of that inflationary pressure this time as well. Inflation, as we've seen, is starting to actually decelerate. So with that deceleration, that will really pressure in the outgoing years. We won't be required to make up as much on the inflationary front either.
Thank you. Commissioner Akindoju.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your presentation. Just want to know what's the percentage, you talked about contractual cost going up about 25 million. What percentage increase does that come to?
So you're saying contractual increase of 25 million?
Yes, please. The two major driver of that deficit, contractual cost and the decrease in transfer fees, a deed.
Okay, so we had contractual, the increase in contractual cost was about 7.5 million that we presented, and an 11 million decrease in our deed transfer tax.
Correct.
So that would be about an $18.5 million increase. So we're working on the way it's calculated out this year, about $7 million would equal about 1%. So at 18.5%, you'd be looking at roughly a little over 2.5% that's driving up a little bit more than 2.5% of that 9.7%.
2.5%?
Yeah.
Okay. We've done a lot of increase in assessment of properties. That in turn should give an increase in the tax rate. Why are we considering additional increase on the actual rate?
So that 9.7%, I just want to be very clear, that's not an increase in the tax rate. So that's an increase in the total taxable revenues. The way that 9.7 is made up, it's made up of a combination of the assessment growth and the change in the tax rate. So as the assessment growth increases, that it decreases the amount of an increase we'd have to see in the actual tax rate. So that 9.7 doesn't represent the tax rate that we're looking for. That's just the overall growth that we're looking for in terms of taxable revenue.
Okay, I said that, and if I have time, I said that because I'm thinking that what we hear on radio about the 10% has been already inputted in this to offset the deficit. Am I right?
So that 9.7%, that's what we're looking for to offset that deficit, to offset that funding shortfall. So what will happen is we'll be, all the business units will be going back, presenting their budgets to the budget committee, and there can be gives and takes from that at that point in time as based on the will of council.
Yeah.
And once we actually figure out what all those gives and takes are, that's when we'll set our final tax rate. But we'll also have at that point know what our assessment growth for the year is going to be, and that will also have an impact on what the actual tax rate will be. It will not change this 9.7 that we're talking about.
So my last question will be, how therefore would the increase in value of assessment not offset the planned increase in tax rate? Your planned increase in tax rate is about 9.7%. What's the actual increase in value in percentage, given the increase in assessment?
So we've been estimating about a 3.5% increase in the assessment. But as I said, that increase in assessment will not affect that 9.7. That 9.7 does not represent the increase in the tax rate that we're looking at. That's the increase in the taxable revenues.
Okay.
So the rate is used to set those, like the rate will be used to set what our revenues end up being, but that rate is not a 9.7% increase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It was something I was thinking about sort of last night after the HRM budget meeting, and then while I was heading here this afternoon. Both of those fiscal updates, didn't hear a whole heck of a lot about how much HRM's response to various disasters and other things factored into the shortfall. So I'm just wondering, how much did HRM's response to the wildfires, the floods, our involvement in housing and homelessness, and the new RCMP contract, how did all of that factor in to the shortfall that we're looking at? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. So in terms of the response to the environmental issues that we saw this year, so the hurricanes, the floods, and the fires, those costs are not actually factored into the cost of the initial response to those are not actually factored into the budget here. So those costs we've either covered off through the risk reserve that we have, and we'll be expecting to recoup a lot of that money from claims that we're making under the disaster financial assistance program of the province to recoup a lot of those funds, and that will replenish the reserve. So while the initial responses to those events would not be captured in this, there may be pressures that the business units have identified, things they can do to mitigate future future responses or future events. That would be part of that. We don't have that exact figure as to how much each of those business units might be doing on that. In terms of the RCMP contract, we do have $2.6 million that we've factored into that for an increase in the contract this year. That's HRM's estimate of what that increase is going to be. We don't have that final number yet. That doesn't include any of the when the contract was signed a couple of years ago, there was a retro portion of that payment that was done. We don't have that factored into this year. We have that accrued for a couple of years ago. So that cost has already been accounted for in HRM's books. So that won't have an impact on that $105 million either. What we do have is built in is the expected increase that we've estimated at this point of what that contract increase will be. Well, we are waiting on Treasury Board approval of what that final budget will be from the province, and then we will have a final number on what that is.
Thanks so much for the presentation. Mine is just more question of clarification. So you talked about the RCMP contractual increases. With collective agreement through the HRPA, are those costs captured in the public safety bucket or in the collective agreement or contractual costs bucket?
Those would be captured in the the collective agreement bucket.
Okay. So, and you said, and that bucket collectively accounts for about 25% of the deficit.
It's 25 million of that. Yeah, so roughly a little over 25% of the deficit. Right. And that's not just the HRP, though. That's HRP, that's HRFE.
Certainly, yeah.
QP. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, through you, Chair. First of all, I want to thank your team and your group for actually educating us, giving us actually a big picture of where the financial position is. I forgot to bring this question up when I was asking you a question. It's going to be just one question. Your deficit of 105 is either driven by increase in cost or lower revenues. We've talked about the increase in cost. Are there lower revenues and what percentage year over year?
Yep. The lower revenues, where that's actually captured is that de-transfer tax that we'd spoken about. So that is that $11 million. So that would be about a little over 1.5% of the 9.7 is related to that lower de-transfer tax.
Oops, sorry. Are there any further questions? No, seeing none. Thank you very much. Can't promise we won't pull you up again, but that's the nature of the beast. So at this stage, we will go on to 10.1.2. Before we do that, just want to remind members of the commission that the process for the budget approval is we will have a motion that will be put on the floor. That motion will be debated or amended in any capacity that the board wishes to. That motion will be a referral to council to support whatever it is that we put forward. Council will deliberate that in their budget debates. Council can either reject that in its whole or accept it in its whole, but they cannot alter it. If there is an interest or a request from council to reconsider it, they will push it back to us at a later date with some of the recommendations that they'd like to see considered for that. And at that point, we would reconsider whatever it is that we would have gone forward with. So in the interest of go ahead.
Just a reminder to the board that what your job is, it isn't just straight approval or non-approval of the budget. It's reviewing the budget to see that it's consistent with those obligations you have under Section 55(3) of the Police Act. Okay, so those are the responsibilities of the board, and you're to see if the budget is consistent with the exercise of those responsibilities.
Thank you. Yeah. The other thing that I want to ask our commissioners, just a yay or nay, is that we would adopt for this debate committee of the whole rules that is done in council. Committee of the whole, it allows more questioning. You're not restricted to 5 and 2. So if that's the will of the commission, we can have a little more flexibility in the importance of this debate. Allows for more questioning. Is that okay? No nays? Okay, great. That's what we'll do. Okay, so now we're going to call upon, I think, Chief McLean, are you going to be giving us anything more? I just didn't want to not give you that opportunity. So at this stage, it's debate time. So if someone would like to put the motion on the floor that's in the agenda, and then we can move on to debate on that motion.
I'll do it,
Commissioner
Chair.
Smith, thank you.
Seems like nobody was jumping up for that. So I move that, having ensured that the proposed Halifax Regional Police operating budget for 2024-25 as presented at the October 18th, October 25th, and October 5th, in November 15, 2023 meetings of the Board of Police Commissioners for the Halifax Regional Municipality is consistent with those matters referred to in subsections 55(3) of the Police Act. The Board of Police Commissioners move the following recommendation. 1, that the Halifax Regional Council approve the proposed 2024-25 Halifax Regional Police operating budget of $98,132,100, which includes a proposed increase in the compensation as set out in proposed service enhancement identified in 2024-25 budget information package set out in attachment A, staff report dated November 24, 2023, and as presented by Chief McLean to the board on November 15, 2023.
Seconded by Commissioner Blackburn. Anyone want to speak to this?
Since I put it on the floor, I'll just keep going.
Thank
if you don't mind, Chair.
No.
So again, Chief and I guess both chiefs and everybody involved, thanks for presenting to us multiple occasions. And I'll say thanks again for that added information that we've received over the last little while as well. That kind of helped with the supplementary information that we were asking for. So before I get into debate questions, I'll just ask if you could follow up on two things. One was the cop to pop conversation that we had. You said you had some more information that you want to share on that. So it'd be great to hear that. And also, if you have any more information you could share on the IPTA, and I know there's a motion put forward last meeting Just wonder if you have anything to follow up on that conversation as well.
Yes, through the chair to you, Counselor. Do you have a preference for which you'd like to hear first? Okay. Well, we'll start off with the cop to pop, as it's more commonly known. So Statistics Canada releases annually each year a measurement of the police strength compared to 100,000 populations for municipal and RCMP police forces throughout Canada. And they do this based on population, and it's a mathematical number of police officers, population, and they come up with a number. You had asked, so at the last meeting, I went into a bit of a diatribe, which I've given before in relation to some of the challenges with that, particularly how it affects HRM, because we are unique. We are the only place in Canada that has one municipality served by two different police forces, and so they divide it separately to come up with their number. So since 1996, they've arbitrarily chosen 59% of the population to be attributed to the HRP area in that calculation. So if you went on that number from last year, and you're always a year behind, because it's a calculation for the year behind. So the number for last year, for 2022, was 195.7. Again, the things I've spoken to before in relation to, so that's obviously accurate from a mathematical sense. They use that particular number, the number of police officers we have, that's the number they come up with. The challenge with it is obviously, as I said before, that it doesn't take into effect the daytime or commuter adjusted population of an urban capital city, in terms of this is where everyone comes to party and drink and go to the Metro Center and protest and all these other things. So in terms of the population itself is I would say much greater than that of what that actual number is in terms of the population that is served. That would be true of any city in Canada in terms with downtown and another mix. The only challenge is those numbers don't get divided because there's only one police force serving it, so there's no calculation to that. Also, you have to take into account approximately 20% of my strength, over 100 officers, are in the integrated CID division, which actually serves all the population of HRM. So again, that adds another calculation issue when it comes to determining a true cop to pop for HRM. Back in 2019, StatsCan had stated that, and they made this distinction. The data in this table represents Halifax Regional Police, which has a rate of police strength. Well, back then it was 209, so it's gone down. However, this rate does not include the number of police officers from the RCMP, which shares the responsibility to police the same area. When RCMP officers and the population they served are added to the calculation, the actual rate of police strength or cop to pop amounted to 166. That was back in 2019 per 100,000 population. So interestingly enough, I've looked at some of the other cities across Canada to get a sense of where we stand. So the average national average is actually 181. The Nova Scotian average is 183. But however, and this will probably come up I'm guessing, in Chief Superintendent Christie's presentation later, if you looked at the municipal agencies within Nova Scotia, you'll see a different number. Amherst, 246. Cape Breton, which is the second biggest, 210. Kentville, 268. Truro, 272. Bridgewater, 265. And the winner goes to New Glasgow at 326. Again, these are some smaller agencies. I get all that. But when you look at ours would be 195 in that, and the average for Nova Scotia is, I said, 183. So again, municipal areas have higher numbers than rural areas at the end of the day. If you look at across the country, so you'll see a city like Toronto, which has over 5,000 police officers, obviously, but a huge population. They're at 164, but Montreal is at 210. Fredericton, 157, St. John, 190. I guess what I'm trying to say is these are kind of all over the board, depending on the unique situations that exist in each organization. So if you did a combined calculation for the RCMP and HRP based on last year, you would actually get a cop-to-pop ratio in HRM of 152. If you actually did a calculation for next year based on the population estimates of the HRM report, and that's giving me everything I've asked for, and that's giving Jeff everything he asked for, it would actually be 148 in terms of what the actual number is. So again, I just wanted to, and some of the other places in terms of Vancouver's at 187, Victoria's at 205. And again, I've been to Victoria. Victoria has a bit of a unique situation in terms of they have other, like the Saanich Police Department, which is a separate police department, which borders on Victoria. You can't tell when you leave Victoria and enter Saanich. Like, it's very fluid in terms of, so Victoria is at 205, and Saanich is much lower in the 150s in terms of, but it speaks to that kind of urban downtown reality that exists in terms of having these calculations. So while it does serve, it obviously serves a person, or in terms of giving a bit of a snapshot as to where things land, it has to be considered in the total mix of the environment and some of the complexities that go with those actual calculations.
So I'll get my second question answered when my next go around. Yeah, thank you, Chief.
I guess I was just hoping, Chief, if you had those numbers, I mean, I appreciate the research that was done. If that could be circulated, or I was trying to write them down as quick as I could.
Me too. No, we can certainly. I don't think you want my hand scratch on a piece of paper here in terms of, but certainly we can have them circulated to the board.
We could certainly trade if you like.
Yeah, but we can certainly have them circulated to the board.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. No further comments, debate. Thank you, Commissioner Giles. I have something to offer, but I guess I'll break the ice if Commissioner Giles.
I'm
Go
happy
ahead.
to defer to both the
Okay.
lady and the chair.
No, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I may have telegraphed, I will not be voting in favor of these budgets as presented. And much as I appreciate the comprehension of the presentations we have received, I still do not detect the level of evidence and analysis I would need to be persuaded that the large budget increases being sought will, in any measurable way, serve to make our city better or safer. To be clear on the record, such as it is, I have not been attracted by any of the canned and banal presentations of the type we received last week and 2 weeks before that, some of which have been really bizarre. One of which went so far to suggest that police officers, and I guess it's all of them, have been unable to heal the emotional neglect that they experienced as children. Nonsense and rubbish. Commentary designed only to titillate and annoy rather than to inform and to teach. And to the contrary, decidedly to the contrary, were it up to me and to me alone, and without financial constraints to consider, I would want to ensure that our police services and our police officers, my police services and my police officers, had every available amenity. I mentioned Monaco, where there is a police officer on every corner, a minimum of 4 at each intersection. Now that is a policing model I could endorse, but it is not up to me. And as a person providing some level of civilian or citizen oversight, and as a person who lives in this city and who sees all of the myriad places where limited funding is crying out to be spent, I cannot simply permit our police to dictate what they want and then merely go along with it. Additionally, I cannot help but think, against the backdrop of the predictions by some, that we are now facing a 10% tax increase, that I am somehow insulated or immunized from an attempt to do my bit to relegate that form of budgeting projection to the dustbin. When I look around, as all of those in this room look around, I see a city with crumbling infrastructure, infrastructure which is not being renewed and expanded as required. I see streets which are main streets, which are all but impassable, such as I have seen in the numerous third, fourth, and fifth world countries to which I have traveled. I see a city which is dirty and grubby, much as Portland, Maine, or Newark, New Jersey were in the late 60s through to the early 80s. I see a city full of citizens or transients for whom their only residence is a tent, and to whom the only hot meals available are from a soup kitchen. I see cuts to public transit such that people like my own assistant struggle to get to work on time. I see streets not cleaned, not plowed, not salted, and I see lawns not mowed. I see places like the Colt, as popular recreationally as is the Commons, in total darkness for hours each day. Now, to be clear, I get it that certain parts of the police budget increase being sought, and to some extent, I am in accord with the submission made to us by CAO O'Toole on November 24th. I understand the difference between fixed cost requirement pegged largely, though apparently not exclusively, to collective agreements and to service enhancements. I understand the need for the latter, only I do not understand the latter to take precedence over some forms of fiscal responsibility, which many in our city are increasingly coming to expect. So here is where I am. As a citizen, as a taxpayer, and as a member of this commission, with responsibilities not so much to the police, but to the broader public with respect to the police, here is where I am. Police science program, I get it, and I endorse it. So let's specialize those roles and release those populating the program now back into mainstream policing. Background and security clearance, no. I say find another way. Save $126,800. EAP, the same, no. Let's dovetail to the extent we can with HRM's EAP programs. Save another $122,700. Hate crime, yes, of course. To use the vernacular of many, a no-brainer. As the chief and I discussed at the last meeting, or perhaps the meeting before, we see increasing instances of hate crimes daily. And they come from all kinds of social situations, not just the war currently underway between the Israelis and Hamas. CRO, it's been well explained to me, and I get that too, but I suggest 4 instead of 6. Save $257,200. Patrol division, no, it has not been well explained to me. I cannot understand why rising crime rates need more boots on the ground, but even with more boots on the ground, crime rates continue to rise. We need a different way, and we need a better way. We need to ask ourselves if more and better policing is the best response we can manage to homelessness, to poverty, to addictions, and to mental illness. I do not see us as policing our ways into the amelioration of those great social injustices, which are sadly increasing day by day. And if policing is the answer, it has simply not been shown to me. So, in terms of additional boots on the ground, I say 2, which in combination with the comebacks from police sciences gives us 5 new officers on parole. Save $1,286,000. So what are those savings? Well, I put them at $1,792,700. So what, you say? So what? Well, that's enough for 40 street navigators. Enough for 60 semi-permanent shelters for those who really have no shelter at all. Enough for 2 new electric buses, and the list goes on and on. Now, I can hear it. What's $1,792,700 against the backdrop of a $1 billion operating budget? Well, it's a reflection of taking some responsibility. And it's a motion for an amendment to the recommendation being sought that I am prepared to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? He didn't put an amendment on the floor. He's ran out of time for that. I'm going to come back to him. Perhaps there are other members who would like to speak. If not, I will.
Point of order, Madam Chair. How did I run out of time? We are on expended time.
No, we're on a number of times you can come back,
Gotcha.
but I did allow you to finish your statement. Okay, so I will, I'm not going to, I don't want, do I need to ask Harry to take the chair if I want to just speak?
Yes. Oh, no, you're gonna put a motion in.
If I put a motion on, yeah.
Why don't you let Harry
Okay.
take the chair?
Commissioner Critchley, as the vice chair, would you take the chair while I offer some comments?
Certainly happy to, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so where I'd like to start with is I want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that is going into what does public safety look like in this municipality. We as a board, we have a role to play in that we have to consider what our chiefs are telling us is required based on what the pressures are that they understand it to be. We are not the experts in that. We do also have to be mindful of the community perspective and understanding of the pressures that they see day to day. And I think Commissioner Giles spoke to many of them, which is, their transit, their the unhoused. The unhoused, I know, is keeping a lot of people unsettled, and it's difficult to watch and see where that might go. We heard unprecedentedly around in last week's presentations, although somewhat mired in some confusing approaches. Overall, it was a huge concern around housing and mental health responses. As a counselor and as a board chair, I get a lot of public that reach out and just talk about their concerns around, not around the specific effectiveness of our policing and nor the suggestion that they shouldn't be there, but that new and other models might be worth considering and subsequent to, so of course, again, I come back to where I spoke of, which is the overarching public safety piece that is important. And I think this board has spoke broadly on that in our strategic priorities around investigating other models, looking at policing and safety, and how do we serve for safe communities differently. So I don't think that needs to be debated tonight, that we have that sensibility to be supportive of a change like that. What I also come back to is the undeniable facts of growth. We're seeing it. We see it in the cranes that are in this city. We're seeing it in our municipal banter, and I'm gonna say banter and decision making that's coming down from our provincial counterparts and our provincial ministers and departments that are making unilateral decisions around municipal planning approvals and such. We're seeing that the public hears it. So it would be a far cry from, in my perspective, to suggest anywhere that this is not a growing city. It most certainly is. That comes with pressures to our policing. I don't think we can deny as well. We've seen reports in this chamber around the stresses and pressures of policing now in all cities across the country, and I would say across other jurisdictions around the world, the impact on health and delivery of, and the health of members who are serving. Our chief, the current acting and the previous chief, we've had good conversations around the importance of how to make sure that they have the members to serve the public in a way that is safe and effective, and in a way that keeps the community safe while those members are serving and responding to crime and concerns that are raised. So I lay that all together in my thoughts about how does this board move forward with a request from our chief on items as was noted, and I'm just going to repeat them. So police science program, looking for 1 sergeant and 1 constable. The background and security clearance unit, 2 civilian investigators. Yeah. Pardon me? Okay, just let me finish this. Employee assistance program, 1 coordinator, hate crime, 1 constable, community response officer, 6 constables, and patrol divisions, 12 constables. I would like to come back, I'm not going to do it now, but I would like to come back with an amendment to look at how do we support the public safety office in maybe seconding some of those members should we proceed to approve this ask. I'd like to consider us asking, directing the chiefs to utilize a couple of those constables to support the public safety piece around developing new models, developing a mental health response model that is conducive to the research that we know, the research the municipality has done through the public safety office, through our HR offices, and those sorts of things. I'm not going to put it on right now because I think I would want to hear from other members around what their tolerance is for the overall ask. And then I'll just leave it there because I think that that's something that I'd like to see us go forward with. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Kent. I'm happy for you to resume being the chair or the.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner
Any further speakers? Commissioner Akindoju.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to thank all the chiefs and your team for all the great jobs that you're doing up till now. I want to clearly state that I've never seen the role of policing in homelessness. I do not personally think it's your role. You're called to serve around homelessness. I do not see it as your direct responsibility to challenge or deal with mental illness. Neither is your concern about poverty. What I see, your primary role is to maintain security and order. I have seen, coming from an undeveloped country, 23 years into this country, I have seen insecurity. It's hard, it's painful, and you don't want to see it. A lot of people have moved from their country because of insecurity, not because of economic issues. No matter how rich or poor you are, if you're not secured, you're not well. Therefore, to that end, I respect and support all forms of policing and policemen and women and their roles so far. But I struggle totally with year-to-year dollar increase. Every year, 6 million, 4 million, that. When is that going to stop? I am looking forward to when we strategically start to look forward to a different police modeling. And I'll give you an example. In the UK today, they have totally, almost eradicated police on the streets, looking after speeding and all sort of things. They simply use, over years, they've invested in cameras that earn the police huge dollar revenue. those men and women have over time been redeployed into other areas. I would suggest that we look at that in the future. Or I would say that again, suggest that we look at that now and in the future. It will draw additional revenue. It will curb all sorts of things happening on the streets, and it could also be used for criminal detection. It is important that we recognize that we're all human beings and will come and go. All the men and women in policing will work for a while and be retired. I'm a strong believer of succession. Therefore, if you stop to recruit into the armed forces, you are weakening the armed forces. To that end, I would totally support the addition of new men and women to replace all the numbers that we have been told that are eligible to retirement at any time. If you're eligible to retirement, you can call in and say, I'm gone tomorrow. Therefore, if we're not ready and to hire new people and train them up to date, then we're weakening the police. If I would suggest, I would give a support for the 1.3 or 1.4 million highlighted for the increase of for the hire of new men and women into the armed forces. I'll rest my case there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just to sort of piggyback on what Commissioner Akindosha was saying, cameras would be lovely. Wouldn't that be fabulous? And I hope the province is listening, because that's the only way that we're going to get that. We keep hearing that it's apparently going to be part of the new Motor Vehicle Act. I mean, the Motor Vehicle Act, I don't think, has been updated. I think there's still legislation in there that deals with horse and buggy, and might be dealing with horse and buggy in another 10 years. So, you know, this is going to be an issue that that we will be dealing with for a while. I got to tell you, as a counselor, traffic and speeding is the number one complaint that I have in my inbox. And I agree completely that traffic cameras would certainly go a long way to controlling that. You know, certainly I've seen it firsthand in Edmonton when traffic cameras were put in place. Speeding and traffic issues plummeted. So that, you know, there's that point there. I guess the other point I want to make too is that I just feel like every year we're tying more hands behind police back. I mean, a couple of years ago we made the decision about polygraph use, and understand completely the reasons why we made that decision. And yes, it has the ability to definitely not be used in the way it should be. But now, you know, as we have learned, the evidence has been presented to us that doing background checks manually, for want of a better term, it takes time and it takes people. And now, you know, we've been asked for 2 civilian investigator positions to do those background security clearances. So what, we're going to say no to that and tie their hands behind their back again? Hate crimes. The evidence has been presented to us that hate crimes are on the rise. And is this something that we want people doing off the sides of their desks? You know, the other thing that we've heard loud and clear, and the numbers back it up, we've got a lot of officers that are out for wellness issues, whether it be physical, whether it be emotional, you know, mental health. they're out. Officers are out. And so I think having that employee family assistance coordinator to help our officers navigate the system is imperative. You know, we've had the discussion about the body worn cameras, and some folks will say, well, the evidence isn't clear as to whether or not it changes behavior of either police or the public. I'm not looking at it as a tool to change people's behavior. For me, that's a tool just like computers in the car. And it's something that the courts are going to start demanding. Um, you know, the rest of the world has moved on to audio video recording of events. Are we still going to send our officers out there with a notepad and a pencil to get the job done? Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense. So you know, that's sort of where I'm at. I'm very much on the same page as Chair Kent, in that, you know, we've got the undeniable facts of growth. We've hit 500,000 people here. We weren't supposed to hit 500,000 for another 11 years. If you got more people, you need more staff. And it doesn't matter if it's more staff in Parks and Rec to teach swimming lessons, or whether it's more people to, you know, mow the right-of-ways. You need more police officers to keep the peace in a bigger community. So anyway, I'll sit back and wait to see what amendments are put on the floor, but that's pretty much where my starting point is, Chair Kent. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? I do have the chair right at this minute. I'm not, just checking on other members, if anyone, other members want to speak to it before I then come back. I'm happy to come back. And so Commissioner Critchley, you take the chair, please. Thank you. So I am prepared to put a motion on the floor, but before I do that, I want to also just finish my thoughts. You know, we have to be very mindful of the pressures, I think, of realistic thoughts about what's the appetite even at the council chamber and within the, when we see the kind of presentation about the kind of shortfall that we do have, and the tolerance of our taxpayers and such, we are serving every day, whether from this chair or other. We have to be mindful of that. I still believe strongly that there is a need for our policing services to be supported and healthy and have the tools and the resources to do what they have to do. So I'm in favor of this presentation, this request from the chief. What I'd like to do, though, is put a motion on the floor to change his perspective on and direction from us on where we would maybe see some of these officers allocated. So I'd like to propose that the Board Police Commission, that this motion be amended to take 2 equivalent FTEs from the 12 Patrol Division constables outlined in Halifax Regional Police's proposed service enhancements identified in the 2024-25 budget information package in order to resource the development of the strategic plan recommended in the police transformation study. These 2 equivalent FTEs would be seconded to community safety as service system managers for a minimum of 3 years for the development of the strategic plan and subsequent implementation. Funding remains with Halifax Regional Police to pay for these positions.
Seconded.
I'll take the chair and recognize that Commissioner Critchley seconded that motion. I'm not sure how we need to play this football. So we have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Critchley, you have the chair again.
Certainly.
Because I want to speak to my motion. So this is intended to be in recognition of the many reports, the many recommendations. We have the mass casualty, we have the transformation, we have the recommendation, the report that came in around defunding to this board. We have the Wortley report. We have so many things at play that are suggesting that change is upon us. change is required, good models, different models. And I know we've talked to the chief, as I've talked to members of the policing, that they're not opposed to thinking outside and differently. This is what this is intended to get us to. I think as well that this would be welcome to the public certainly, and to council consideration. I do think it's important that the funding remain within the Halifax Regional Police, that we to second them to the Public Safety Office would be a big significant change to some budget considerations that they have. I believe in supporting and funding our policing the way they need to be, but I also believe in changing some of the models. And to effectively do it, we need some policing members at the table consistently to develop the models, to be part of that, the work that's being done. So I'll leave it there, see what folks say. I'm probably, I don't know if I'm laying something completely off the table that our professional here at Public Safety, Bill Moore, is rapidly trying to get his head around, but so be it. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So thank you for this motion. So two clarification pieces, either you can come back or maybe somebody else can answer it. So to understand this, and it's not up anymore, so I'm using memory, which is not a good thing. Okay, great, because I didn't want to do that. So what this motion would do would be, rather than funding 12 patrol positions, it would fund 2 full-time positions, which would be the same cost as if we had 1 patrol, but they would be working with the Public Safety Office.
10 patrol and 2 for public safety.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so 10 patrol. Okay, see, this is why I did this. So funding 10 patrol, but 2 would go to Public Safety Office.
No, funding 12 new FTEs. No, sorry. Taking the 12 that were asked for patrol, dividing them to 10 patrol and 2 for public safety.
All right, thank you. That's where I was lost. All right, great. So then the other positions are not part of this motion. So if somebody wants to bring that forward, that'd be an added item. Okay. All right. That's where I was a little confused on that. So with that clarification.
No, I just want to be clear. The original, sorry.
So do you want to let?
I'll finish and then you guys
I'd
can
like
clarify.
to answer that question,
Yeah, so
Mr. Chair.
I'll just finish what my thoughts were.
He's holding me to everything now because I've done it to him.
So I'll
Loving it.
just finish what my thought is and then you can
Yes.
answer it. I don't think I need to come back until maybe later on. So this motion would fund the full 12. 2 would go to public safety to work on implementing the strategic plan.
The public safety,
Yes, but they'd be in the Public Safety Office,
yes.
still within HRP, but Public Safety
And I'd
Office.
like to speak to that.
Okay.
Chair Kent.
And the other pieces, I did not touch the other pieces, but I support those. So I'm not amending any of the first allocation ask, which would be those that I didn't get a chance to. Just a second, I'm trying to find them very quickly. Hate crimes, the police sciences, EAP, background checks, and community response officers.
Okay.
Those would stay within the motion. The last 2 would change.
Thank you, Chair Kent.
Last 10, sorry, 12.
Any other commissioners with questions or want to speak to this amendment?
Sorry, I mean, I want to assume that based on my statement, this tallies partially with what I suggested as well. I have said I would vote for the 1.4 million as amended by you in terms of distribution. But can I add one more thing? Because it just doesn't make sense if we do not think about cost overrun, inflation, and all of that. I am looking at the non-compensation operation cost, and I would want to add that of 1.9 million as part of what we should approve with this budget. The only thing that I'm against is the compensation benefit. That's my own submission here, if it's clear.
Chair Kent.
I think I'd like to see us vote. That wouldn't be a friend, that's not, to me, that's not a friendly amendment to my amendment. That would require that my motion that I've put on the floor as in the way of amendment to the original motion is just that consideration of those 10. Just,
Thank you.
yeah, but I can express it on myself, on behalf of myself, because I'm the mover,
Certainly.
correct? Yes, just to be clear,
Say it's not friendly.
it's not friendly.
Good.
So I'm sticking with what I put on the floor. But
Certainly. I just want to see if anyone wants to speak to the amendment before there's a vote on it. Commissioner Smith.
I didn't finish because
Oh, sorry.
I would have loved to see that we put a dollar value for clarity. I mean, I see the grammar here. The dollar value to what you have proposed there would be the 1.4 million, correct? But redistributed. I just want to get that clarification.
Andrea, can you put the,
Sorry, I was just trying to read something else and I can watch my screen.
okay.
It's just for us to have clarity. Thank you.
Well, so I mean, this is your motion.
Yeah.
Do I understand you to say that the only change you're looking for is that, so what I understand Chair Kent to be proposing is that the equivalent of 2 FTEs will be seconded from within this increase to support public safety. And you would like the dollar value associated with those 2 full-time equivalent positions to be included in the motion?
Wrong. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I see this motion is just simply saying redistribute the ask to a maximum of 1.4 million, basically, simple.
There's no 1.4 million number.
We have a budget that we're talking about. Budget is in numbers. So I want to refer to numbers as I understand it, not just the words. We can be lost in the words, but this for me is saying that it's 1.4 million. That's the figure of 1.388700 is what is being asked for approval, but that the distribution should be changed. That's my understanding, and I want this to be clear.
That's right. Yeah, the distribution of the resources is different. The total amount's not going to change.
You're just saying, that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you very much. So what I want to get clarified, and then I have a suggestion. So the clarification is, so we have the current motion, the main motion that's on the floor, not the amendment, the main motion that's on the floor. So would this then be, so the first motion has a number 1, the Halifax Regional Council approve, propose, blah, blah, blah. So then would this be a number 2, or would this amend number 1 on the main motion?
It would amend number 1.
Okay,
So that essentially, what I would suggest that we do is that Commissioner Giles also has an amendment as well, that we would vote on every amendment that's going to be proposed.
right.
And then we would take a break and figure out how that impacts the overall motion.
Okay, so could we, all right, actually, you know what? If we're gonna take other amendments, I won't make my suggestion. I was gonna suggest that we add the positions as numbers and then we could vote on those, but if there's other amendments coming, then I won't do that. So with that piece, so I'm gonna just, now that that's clarified, just go into my thoughts on it. So overall, I could support the 2 positions going into community safety, dealing with strategic plan, because I think that's an important. Why I wouldn't support, and I'd like it to be broken out as we go forward, why I couldn't support the other 10 officers is only because I really do feel that the point of these officers mostly focusing on the mental health in hospitals still is concerning to me. And, you know, with the I know there's a motion for reach out to the province, and hopefully they'll change the IVLP or IPTA to not change, but clarify that it doesn't have to be a police officer or a peace officer or whatever what's a qualified person. I can't think of the wording right now. I just am not comfortable with adding more police doing that role, but understanding, and we had this conversation before, on the flip side, it was shared with us that 706 hours were spent with RCMP members at the hospital, and with HRP 4,653 hours. So I do know that there's a significant amount of time being spent at hospitals for police, and this would help that. But I do get concerned still with the fact that we would have police in hospitals spending so much time when they can be out in our communities. But it's talking both sides, because we can't do both. We can't have them meeting the mandate of the act, but also not doing what they're supposed to do. So it's really hard for me to support the other 10, understanding that the ask was mostly to focus on the mental health piece.
Thanks. So I'm
that's
gonna
where
let,
that's where I'm concerned.
Marty just speak quickly, just a clarification point, and then I see the acting chief as a point.
I think one way to deal with this would be to break out the various requests, the patrol officers broken out, and then we can deal with that. So passing the amendment will not mean you're passing the entire budget, right?
Yeah.
So we can break down each category if that works for the board as a whole. Someone wants to make the motion to break that out, we can do that as a matter of procedure, and then we can take each line item for the men and the officers and break it out that way, okay? And that will give you the chance, if the board wants to adopt the motion here, would be simply to amend the patrol officer thing to take two seconded, but it wouldn't mean approving the entire block of patrol officers, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, and that works for me.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify is that a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Are there any other commissioners who want to speak? So I guess the amendment will have to be, the motion will have to be amended to reflect that change. And are there any other commissioners who want to speak to pardon me, Chief, yeah.
No, well, I think, Andrew, it would be helpful if maybe we could get the breakdown and put it on the screen too, so everybody will see each one as they deal with them.
Yeah, so when I do the breakdown for the 12 patrol division constables, would you want me to have that separated out as 10 patrol
If this
officers and
passes.
2 for the security?
Only once it passes. The amendment hasn't been adopted yet, so
So this
you
motion
just
is-
set it out the way that it's been requested and then move through it.
and the chief wants to-
Acting chief, yeah.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Just so through the counselor, Commissioner Smith, I just want to be clear about something in terms of, and I've tried to say it a few times. I think it's gotten caught up sometimes in the noise and which I suggest is, and I accept to be legitimate. I've said several times, standing up here and sitting down here, if I would love to be out of the mental health business, 100%. Even with the creation through community safety, I don't know if I'll ever be able to be out of that, just because of certain issues. But to be clear, if this board collectively could wave a magic wand right now, and I was out of the mental health business tomorrow morning, my ass isn't going to change, because those officers are not about responding to mental health calls. That's one piece of it. It was meant to highlight as part of the data and the justifications and rationale and articulate in terms of trying to mitigate against some of the issues we have with, because really it's not about going to mental health calls. What it was about was having a pilot with the hospital where we could have less officers in that space covering more at one particular time. So that would free up the frontline response, which has been my priority from the start, since the first day I came here, about freeing up frontline response to do all of those other things that I think are important that we need to do the traffic and the other issues that the counselors get on a daily basis in terms of, as you'll see, in terms of traffic enforcement and all these other things, proactive response and all those other things. So, and I understand, and part of it's my fault in terms of how it kind of got communicated. So I accept that, but really this is about the ability to bolster frontline response in terms of overall, and not solely dedicated to dealing with mental health issues, but in,
Chief, I just want to let you finish up, but I do want to clarify that where we're debating the amendment here, the amendment, I think it's just been clarified by the mover, is just to, as it relates to the secondment of 2 of the 12. That's all that's being discussed right now.
no, I
So-
just wanted to, I
but
felt it
appreciate you,
necessary
yeah. Certainly, yeah.
to clarify, and
But if you want to finish your thought, I'll happy for you to finish.
I think you finished it for me there.
Well, there you go.
In terms of.
Good
and-
timing.
But very, very briefly, in terms of, we've had discussions with the province within the last week and a half in terms of the executive director, and when I think I communicated that to you in terms of the assistant deputy minister around that very issue around IPTA and who needs to stay at the hospital. I think that's been bolstered, in fact, by the CAO who isn't here and the city solicitor who's not here today in terms of taking that forward. But I also want to think, I've looked closely at the IPTA, and I think the part where we talk about the authorized individual actually places back to section 14 of the Acts, where it talks about a judge can order 2 people to pick up somebody and take them to the hospital under an order: the police and an authorized individual. So that's the person who's actually named in the order. That could be anybody in this room that a judge could name. It could be Martin Ward will go then be part of taking someone. So in terms of to answer your question about the IPTA that you asked the last time.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, so let's just leave it there, and I think those are all great points. We'll bring them back to debate on the full motion. I appreciate that.
Am I possible to ask my second question? I know that was.
I think if it's a quick question, yeah.
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah, so the only amendment, the only piece in Marty, I'll look at you, our solicitor. This doesn't go into the world of operational, because we're directing officers to be in a certain place like that. That is within our purview as a board to be able to say, put these officers in this place. We can do that.
I think at this point, I mean, you're making a recommendation to council,
Right.
right? And so council, once it gets to council, in effect, council it's within council's discretion as to which way, how they want to align certain things or
So
distribute resources. So you're really recommending that.
right.
to
So
them.
in theory,
I think it's nitpicking,
Right, so
if
in
I were to say,
so in
Yeah.
theory, if we say we want these 2 positions to be with public safety, it's really in the chief's purview to actually do it. So we're recommending it, but the chief doesn't have to follow that. So it's like, thank you for your,
well, no, I think it'll get to council. And
but
then,
council can't say we're off, like we just approve a number.
well, council talks about there's another section in the act where council gets to decide the complement and the nature of the complement
Okay.
of the force.
Right.
And that is where you go back to saying how many positions should be with police, how many should be with public safety, how should we distribute the funds? So as part of council's overall responsibility for policing the community, they can talk about the distribution of resources and within police, the complement of police.
Okay.
How many officers, how many civilian workers, that's all within council's purview.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, I just want to see, Commissioner Akindoji, if there's any other commissioners you've spoken once already on the amendment. I know, but I'm allowed to see if there's other commissioners who want to speak first, where you've already spoken. So Commissioner Blackburn, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Giles, no? Certainly now, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's out of strategy for us to start thinking of police role or responsibility allocation. Really, we're talking about one. If we approve one man today and the man tomorrow resigns, then we'll come back again. We give the resources to the police to deploy in line with operational efficiency or efficacy. I have seen a scenario, if you would allow me argue, whereby in a vessel, a cook has been given a gun because they needed one more man for battle. So if we are tied down and driven on one person for science program, one person for hate crime, one that, I don't care about that. We trust the chief to use the resources allocated to him as needed. And therefore, that is why I am saying we need new people on ground. Correct. We need succession plan. My proposal is, if we're going to look at this, allocate the number of people that is required based on this budget and allow. He has said it several times that the breakdown is just to make it easy for us to understand. Lastly, we need provincial involvement. We need HRM involvement. Men are tied down in the hospital waiting hours when there are crime issues on the street that needs to be advocated. They cannot leave. The more people that are released from that, that's a bigger allocation.
Sorry, we're still just talking about the amendment, not
I'm still talking about the amendment.
the amendment relates to the secondment policy.
It's the same thing. We're talking about distribution and secondment, not to public safety alone, but allocation of police. Because I guess the secretary is working on the distribution.
Right now, the amendment that's on the floor relates to a proposed secondment to FTEs, to public safety. That's what we're discussing.
And it's a recommendation.
As the solicitors explained.
All right, thank you. I rest my case.
Question?
Sorry, I guess we're waiting for the new amended motion.
Yes, so Vice Chair, I have the list of the proposed service enhancements ready, but do you want to deal with Commissioner Kent's amendment first?
I think that makes sense. I'm just wondering if it could be put up on the screen. Okay, so seeing no other speakers, I'll call for the question on the motion, on the amendment. I guess I will not do that. So with the motion as it's presented, I'll just call for the question. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, the amendment passes. Ken, you can certainly take over.
You're feeling the heat. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Okay, so that motion, now we're back to the main motion. And Andrea, that would be helpful, I think, now if you were to put those up around the breakout, because I can appreciate Commissioner Akindoju's theory around is this. We're supporting the ask versus the breakdown, but the breakdown is the premise to the ask with some understanding of why there's a need. So I think it's a good relevant point. And I know Commissioner Giles as well spoke to that. So the breakout.
Okay, so what we should be doing is having each one of these should be a motion.
So why don't you speak to that?
So Chair and Commissioners, I think the simplest way to do this is probably to break these out and have a separate motion for each one of these requests. I think that will tie into what people are looking for in terms of the overall, because there's some, I know that Commissioner Smith, for example, was interested in the patrol, the number of patrol constables. And Commissioner Giles had interest in certain ones. So basically, I think the simplest way to avoid just, amendment after amendment after amendment would be to go through with a motion for each one of these and deal with it and amend or defeat it. And if one, for example, let's just say the police science program, I don't think it's going to be defeated. But if it was, right, then that could be amended on the spot, right? So if someone had some issue with that, and then we could move on to the next one, if that's acceptable to the commissioners. Yeah.
I just have a question of clarification. In terms of the breakdown, I know at a previous meeting, I believe Chair Kent passed a motion to direct the inclusion of the body worn camera position. I just don't see that in the breakdown here. So I assume that for that position, you'd want us to follow the same protocol in terms of.
We would, if that's
Yea or
part
nay.
of the request.
I think it was determined that was already approved.
Oh.
We just hadn't been able to, hadn't hired someone for that position. And then it kind of just got sidelined. And my comments at the time was related to encouraging the chief to get on that, right?
So
So I don't think it was a motion specifically, because that would add another one, and it's already, position is already supported.
Yeah, through your chair to Commissioner, if you look at the numbers, the original budget that we got from HRM, which I think is the before the enhancements, the 96,700,000, the body worn camera position is in that number.
do is ask Lindell to put each one of those on. Go through it because it was his original motion. You want me to suggest the original motion? He brought the original motion for the budget. He
Okay,
put it
good
on,
plan.
okay? Okay.
So Chair Kent, if I would just like to make a suggestion before we can vote on each of the specific ones, I think the main motion itself needs a friendly amendment in order to include the list so that we can break them out and vote on them separately.
I think
Would you
we may have
agree with
had
that?
Did we have that already?
I don't think we had a friendly amendment for that, no.
No.
So if I could ask Commissioner Smith to do two things, seeing as he put the original motion on the floor. First, that he could propose an amendment to deal with each one separately. And then perhaps as we deal with each one, Commissioner Smith could put it on the floor. And then just for the purposes of debate, okay?
And this is how I would have it if we did it as a friendly amendment, have it at the end.
So if the chair will allow, I think it's friendly, and the seconder is.
Who was your second? I forget. Lisa? Lisa.
Yes, it was.
No, it was identified
It
you.
was you.
Oh, the overall, yes, yeah.
It's friendly?
Who's on first?
Okay, so
So let's get to the list.
Do you want that?
I think
In that memo as well, in the motion.
not. What commissioners are going to support? Okay, so Andrea,
Young Andrew, can we put the list up, please?
Yeah, I was just making a correction.
so with
Gonna
that
break out.
is, I think before we go down this road, so everyone understands what we're doing. We have the main motion. We've had a friendly amendment to break out each of the allocations of the FTEs for consideration each separately. The debate on this in its entirety is still open and on the floor. And then we will go through each one. At that point, there will be no debate. It will just be voting on each one. Correct? No, there will be debate on
We
each
need a
one?
motion, we're gonna have a motion for each one of these with a debate on it, because I know that Commissioner Lindell, Smith, and Commissioner Giles will want to speak to each one of these, or certain
Okay,
of these
so-
items.
Okay, so is someone working on the,
We're going to be separating
Language?
out the vote
So let's
on,
let's
on
let's have a motion.
section A, section B,
have
section
a
C,
motion for A.
section D.
okay, you folks figure that one out.
Okay, so that
I'm
Lindell
leaving
put-
it with you.
Lindell put A on the
Yeah,
floor.
I have to start.
Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So I would start with the first position, which is the police science program, 1 sergeant, 1 constable. So I have no direct comments on this item. So if nobody else, I would just call for the question for us to vote on it.
Commissioner Critchley?
Thanks.
Oh, do we need a seconder for that one?
Yes.
I'll second.
sorry.
Seconded by Commissioner Critchley, and Commissioner Critchley would like to speak to it.
Thanks. I'll just say I'm very, very supportive of the police science program, and particularly bringing in, new dedicated positions for that role. I think, obviously a huge amount of work is going into training new officers coming in. My hope is that will help to address in a big way some of the issues as it relates to recruitment and retention. I know, we received some information as well about the experience EPO program and, officers coming in and then maybe leaving, whereas that's not so much the case of officers being trained here, starting their careers here. So again, I think this is really, really positive. It was great to come to the graduation ceremony, see all the new officers. in my own work now, I get to see their names on disclosure that I get, and it's always interesting to see a new one. And my sincere hope is that this will also play a role. Obviously, there's a number of other kind of moving pieces as it relates to recruitment and retention. There's the HR study, pieces ongoing there. There's some other work that I know is going on through HR. So my hope is that this will help to address some of those concerns and really address, in particular, the large number of officers who are eligible for retirement soon. So again, I'm very, very supportive of this and think it's a really good proactive investment.
Thank you. Any other speakers on A?
Question?
Question has been called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So the second one, background and security clearance unit to civilians. So this is one that I don't support, and really only the reason I don't support it, I think is important. But I look at the other positions that are being asked for, and I personally put some of the other asks above this one. Not saying that these are not important positions, but just looking at the asks that are in front of us, and I feel like prioritizing some of the other ones are more important to me. So I'll be voting against this one, and happy to hear what other comments from other members.
Did we have a seconder for that? We need a seconder. Commissioner Blackburn has seconded. Is there any debate on number 2B, letter B? Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you. I'll just say I'd echo Commissioner Smith's comments. My hope would be that, as was the case last year with the police psychologist position initially proposed within the context of HRP, that was then kind of reimagined as a position to support the HRM more broadly and other business units, like including the fire. These are, I'm sure, very, very important positions. And my hope would be that there could be some further exploration about cost sharing or resource sharing within HRM human resources, and my sincere hope is that money can be found there to support these positions. But
Any further comments? Commissioner Akindoju.
As I said earlier, we as board members have not done the need assessment. And I think the police board or the police chief and team would have done the need assessment to present this to us. So on what ground are we saying yes or no? We do not have the competence to decide who out of these officers or what role or function, be a cook, a shooter, we do not have the competence at this stage to debate who out of these officers should be hired or not. That's my own, because we have not seen, he did not present a need assessment in detail to us concerning this. My suggestion again would be to approve this based on what has been presented and not go through this channel one by one. Correct.
Anyone else? Commissioner Giles.
Thank you. My sense, with obvious respect to my colleague, is that if I am not qualified to make an assessment on B, I'm not qualified to make an assessment on any of A through F. That would be unfortunate. We have a dual function in my respectful submission. One is to consider the representation of the need, and the other is to consider, against the backdrop of the financial request, how much of it is affordable. And to add to my preface, a preamble, I agree with everything that Commissioner/Councillor Blackburn had to say. I am a support your local police kind of person. I don't like it when on Joseph Howe Drive, when I'm going 70, which is 40% above the speed limit, cars go rocketing by me as if they were in the Indianapolis 500. And I don't like it when my neighbor says, who happens to be a Supreme Court Justice, I think somebody was lurking around my backyard, that police officers take 32 minutes to drive from Bedford. I don't like that. But there are things that we can afford as a society and things which we cannot afford as a society. And we have to look at in a principled way at everything we're asked to approve and ask ourselves whether against the backdrop of the whole piece, that's necessary. And there has been, as far as I'm concerned, quite substantial explanation underpinning the request for B. And it seems to me that B entails work which is far and away superior to any senior lawyer who's being laterally hired by one firm from another, any senior accountant who's being laterally hired from one firm to another, any senior business executive, any senior physician, any senior university professor. And I think it's lovely if we could just say, yes, we will have all those things. But you know, when our hosts pass their chocolates at the end of the dinner, we should not, even if we're inclined to do so, take all of them before everybody has at least one. Thank you.
Commissioner Critchley.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just mention briefly as well. So, I mean, I appreciate Commissioner Akintosh's point that, you know, these are, and the chief made this point as well, right? That he goes to all his units, he asks for what's necessary. Based on that ask, he pares it down to what he considers reasonable and palatable. And I know there's a lot of background work, but I mean, I would just encourage the commissioner to keep in mind that, you know, we have obligations under the legislation. You know, the reason that this board exists is to provide civilian oversight, to act in the public interest, to be a conduit to the community. And we have, you know, specific duties under the act. So, I mean, you know, I think we have to ensure that under 53.2 of the legislation that every single piece of the budget that is being proposed is in keeping with our duties and in keeping with the needs and interests of the community. So I think that this kind of, you know, precise and detailed deliberation is precisely what's called for. I actually really appreciate that in this year that we're taking, you know, the level of discourse that, as it relates to the budget has increased so much over 3 years. And I expressed it 2 meetings ago. I'm extremely grateful to the police for the amount, clearly the amount of time that went into the report that was prepared. This is not even where we were 2 years ago, where we had a PowerPoint presentation with graphs with no numbers on the axes. We're far and above where we were. That, you know, everyone is taking this more seriously, and I really, really appreciate that. So, but I do just want to clarify that it is very important that we do this hard and difficult work, because, you know, not only are we required to act in the public interest, but we have these legislative duties.
Commissioner Akintosh.
Thank you. And I'm not trading words here. What I'm simply saying is I would support a 45% cut on the 1.4 million and allow the people who know what to do the distribution. This is a debate. I'm not saying that anybody or any board member should not say what they want to say. I'm just suggesting that what competence do we have in the distribution of the roles of the individuals that the chief has presented. The issue of the debate of the budget can be cut by 80%, can be cut by 90%, but I am specific on the distribution. Why A? Why not B? They know the best. And, you know, I'm trying to say that's their role. It's operational. So, I guess that's simple and clear enough. We can say, okay, we'll look at out of the 1.4 million, we'll probably cut that by 60% or 40% or 20%. I'm good with that. But I do not understand the redistribution of their ask. They've done their analysis. I assume they've done all the work and seen where the gaps need to be filled. That's my suggestion.
Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I will be supporting these asks. These two positions, the civilian investigator positions. And I guess, you know, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, is that, you know what, a couple of years ago, we made the decision to do away with the polygraph, and for all the right reasons. And now we're seeing the unintended consequences of that. And that is the hours upon hours upon hours that it takes to manually do this work. And so, to me, we have, we eliminated the polygraph. And like I said, I supported it for all of those reasons at the time and still support it. But, I think now we need to have those two positions in there so that this is something that is not taking officers off the street when they could be doing, more concentrated work in the community as opposed to behind a desk doing security checks. So for all those reasons, I will be supporting this ask. Thank you.
Any further debate? Shall I call the question? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion, I have to vote. I will vote in favor. Motion carried. Commissioner Smith.
Thanks, Chair. So moving to C, Employee and Family Assistance Program, one constable, one civilian. Put that on the floor.
Commissioner Arcandozzo, second.
Thank you. So this is one I think is really important because having our HR report that came forward and hearing the work that's needed to support those who are dealing with many facets of being a first responder, also getting them back to work and the assistance that their families need. I think this is one of the priorities for me when I look at these positions. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Any further debate? Seeing none, shall I call the question? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
All right, moving on to Hate Crime Unit, one constable. Put that on the floor.
Do we have a seconder? Second. Commissioner Blackburn, second.
Thank you. So this one is a very timely position, considering the many aspects of hate that are happening in communities around not just HRM, but across the country and abroad. So, and we know that our current position, because we have one position now with the Hate Crime Unit, I believe. We have one position, right? Yeah. So that one position, I know that work is tough, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think there was a mention that since the Hate Crime Unit and the constable that's working on that has been doing that job, we've seen an increase of reporting because you have someone doing it. So that shows that it's unfortunate that we see an increase in reporting, but at the same time, it's showing us that we just needed to put more resources into that because there was more issues that weren't being brought forward than we thought. So 100% support this. It's definitely needed. So I would, if there's no one going forward, I'd ask for the question.
Any debate? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried.
And I'll defer this to Commissioner Giles for the next one.
Commissioner Giles, would you like to put the next one on the floor, please?
Well, I'm pretty sure that I can speak to E and F together.
We've already agreed to have them broken out, so let's,
Okay, well, I'll speak
do that.
to E then. It's sometimes difficult. to-
Commissioner
We need
Giles,
a
we need
mover
a
and a
motion first for this
seconder.
one. You'd like to move?
Move the Community Response Office receive 6 new constables
Is there a seconder?
as set out at figure 2 of the report from the CAO dated November 24th of this year.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Smith. Okay, back to you, Commissioner Giles.
Thank you. It's difficult sometimes to be Don Quixote tilting against the windmill. And it's also difficult when one conceives morally, less than intellectually, that the request for the positions is a laudable one and an understandable one. My position is, as I articulated vis-a-vis what will be discussed in F, is that sometimes you have to proceed with what you can afford, and you can't afford everything all the time. That's my simple position. I'd love to be able to say yes to everybody, yes to my spouse, yes to my friends, yes to my colleagues, but sometimes you just have to say no. And my proposition has been to reduce that number of 6 to 4.
So that's an
to
amendment. Thank you. Amendment to the
Amendment to the motion.
amendment to the motion and seconded by Commissioner Blackburn. Any debate on the amendment? Commissioner Critchley.
I'll just say that, although I was very concerned by some of the language that people used in speaking about concerns in downtown Dartmouth, I made it known that I thought anytime anyone refers to someone as undesirable or gross or anything like that, that's completely shameful and should be called out and should not be permitted. I think CRO positions are very valuable. As someone who works in downtown Dartmouth, I know that they're well integrated and they can work closely with the folks at Albany Landing. I think 4 is an appropriate number. It's still an increase. I know a lot of those positions were redeployed to patrol during COVID. I know that they're very popular positions with council. So, I mean, I'm very supportive of 4 positions.
Thank you. Any further debate? Call the question. All in favor of the amended motion from 6 to 4? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Back to the main motion as it's been amended. We now need to, on that main motion, have a vote on the 4. So, any debate on that?
What is that?
That amended motion, the original motion was put forward. You amended it. We approved the amendment. So now we will be voting on the amended motion of E to 6, from 6 to 4. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. We're now on F. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we can do, if we could put the 10 and the 2 on separate lines, if that's okay.
You want to amend the amendment?
Yeah, so amend it to just put, yeah, is that okay?
I'd
Okay.
call that a friendly amendment if
Okay.
you're approving, and seconder, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, and I already spoke to this earlier, so I won't be supporting the 10 and we'll be supporting the 2. So happy to hear any comments or questions.
So we'll vote on the
Do
10
we need a motion
FTEs
on the
first.
floor for the 10?
Sorry, yes, you're right. So I move Patrol Division 12 constables, first 10 FTEs for Patrol Division.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Commissioner Akindoju. Any debate on that? Commissioner Smith, would you like to speak to that?
Nope, no, I already kind
Commissioner
of gave my. point of view.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Critchley?
I just want a question of clarification for the chief. So I'm trying to just do the tally of positions in other areas that were seconded from patrol and which will now allow those secondments to be released back to patrol. So am I right in understanding that with the police science program currently, there are 2 individuals who are seconded from patrol to assist with that program? Is that right?
When the class starts to get up and running, there will be.
Okay.
Not currently, not
No.
right at this moment.
Right. And for background checks, there's 1 person who's seconded from patrol.
Yes, that's correct.
And from EFAP, it's a 12-month pilot to have a second person seconded from patrol.
They're from IES. but
Oh,
they're
from civilian
IES,
mind.
yeah.
Are there any other people who are, what about the CROs? Is there anyone seconded from patrol to fill CRO roles currently? Or?
No, I don't believe so.
So, yeah, my question is just really in supporting these other positions, how many patrol officers are we freeing up who'd otherwise be on secondment? So am I right in understanding there'd be 2 or 3 or?
Well, tomorrow, if this was.
Yeah, approved.
If this was allowed tomorrow, there'd be 1.
That's from
And from the background
background
security.
checks. Yeah.
The employee and efficiency SAM, that would go back to IES.
Right.
But that could be anyone in the organization in terms of, so it could be a patrol constable, potentially. Currently, it's not.
Right.
And the police science program, like I said, would be when it's actually up and running. But the intention is to run it full-time.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so in effect, we're putting two people back
Yes.
back on patrol where it's shifting from it to an annual, like a full-time training model. Is that right? I just want to make sure I clarify.
Yeah, Commissioner, with respect to the police science program, as the chief said, there's nobody currently in those positions right now because we're not running a class.
Right.
So we would be able to put two people in that we wouldn't have to take from patrol.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, but just to clarify though, that if we hadn't approved those positions, which we did, you'd have to second two people from patrol.
We absolutely would, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further debate on the 10 FTEs for patrol division? Hearing none, shall I call the question? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. And it's a tie, so I will break it with my vote in favor. And our final motion in relation to the breakout here is B, which is FB. FB.
And I'll put that on the
Two
floor, Chair.
FTEs. Commissioner Smith, thank you. Is there a second?
Yeah, 2 FTEs seconded to community safety.
And is there a seconder for that? Commissioner Critchley seconded.
Call for the question on that.
Question? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I'm going to now say
I think 5 is sufficient.
sorry, we'll revisit the main motion with some cost updates. So 5-minute break. We'll return at, I'll give you 7 minutes, 5 minutes after 6. Oh, it's okay. I think I get it. Okay, we're ready now to proceed. We need to finish off this item. We have an amended motion on the floor where we went through each of the series of the broken out pieces. Now we're going to vote on the whole motion. So Commissioner, yeah, let's just get on with this because we've got other things to do and he has to leave at 6:30 anyway. So this will allow him to have a little bit debate maybe on the next motion. So any further debate? Call for the question. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Okay.
Now we will proceed to
What are we doing with the
RCMP 24-25 funding request. We have a presentation.
Haven't they done that presentation
It's-
already?
Is this a relative, is this just like an overview presentation? Or is it new information?
Chair, there's some new information. You had requested
Yes.
a discussion document, sort of what comes with the cost per member and sort of a discussion about how RCMP processes all roll up together.
Mhm.
And so it's about 15 slides that
Okay.
walk through that kind of global, high-level review.
Okay, good. Floor is yours.
Chair, would it be helpful if we went to the stand? Great.
And then after.
Go ahead, Chief. Doesn't sound like your mic is on.
Testing, testing. Now it's on. So we'll go through the slides very quickly. Really, it's a discussion about some of the RCMP practices in terms of how all the dollars sort of get rolled up in. And so without any further ado, Jeff Mitchell or Jeff 2 will be helping me and we'll go through the slides accordingly. So we're just going to talk through, and the whole purpose of the slides are often grounded in the Territorial Police Services Agreement or Provincial Police Services Agreement. And in that agreement, there's different phrases when we talk about capital, minor capital, major capital. So it's as simple as saying minor capital might be radars. It might be individual things such as a roadside screening device. Major capital might be the procurement of buildings and actually things like that. So in our world, in my world, the terminology sort of devolves and is grounded in the Provincial Police Services Agreement. So one of the things that happens when you contract the RCMP, you basically play an all-in-one cost. So we're going to talk very quickly about that. We're going to highlight a few of the trends that we're seeing. Chief McLean talked about the COP per pop, so we'll just have a slide on that. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the infrastructure changes that are happening here in Halifax Regional Detachment. So the province can be with us tonight, but the province is always the holder, along with Public Safety Canada, of the agreement. And so it's worth noting that the agreement allows the RCMP or facilitates the RCMP to provide policing in the 3 Northern Territories and 8 provinces. So the RCMP also is vested in peace officer status in every province and every territory. So one of the interesting things about if there's an Olympics or there's an evolving event, an RCMP officer can get on a plane and really go from city to city to city, and upon arrival, they're already vested in peace officer status. The big concept that you've heard me talk about is that the agreement flows money. It flows a structure, just like you're, for lack of a better word, leasing a Ford car or something that provides a mechanism for the costs of policing in any given jurisdiction to be worked between the contract partners and the service delivery agencies. So for an example, some of you know that I came out of the Northwest Territories where had a similar number of police officers underneath me, for lack of a better word, or supporting, but the cost there is just much more higher than it is here. And that's because the economies of scale in a given area, some places might need a police plane. some places like Atlantic Canada might share a police plane. And so again, the nature of policing often dictates the cost. So the contract allows that customization as a organization from coast to coast to coast. So this is just a very quick graph to talk around kind of reconciling all these concepts. And we're all committed to good structures of business practices. And so we have to flow in, obviously, to the Halifax Regional Municipality one. But as the Halifax RCMP, we also leverage the economies of scale of the Nova Scotia RCMP. Some of you have been to the building, for example. We can dip into that group, and we'll talk about some of the infrastructure that we can benefit from time to time. I think the key part is that we're all responsive to clients in HRM. So again, there could be a significant event. Councillor Blackburn talked about the wildfires here earlier in your comments. So Councillor, we tracked about $450,000 in additional costs due to that wildfire. None of that money was actually drawn from or no pressure returned to Halifax Regional Municipality. That's the nature of the contract. If the contract was a municipal police agreement, and there are some places in the country that have a different agreement, then there could be some overrun or going back to the municipality to pay. So the Nova Scotia RCMP, we're very much like HRM. We have a senior management team. The senior officer vested and reporting to the deputy commissioner, and the commissioner is Dennis Daly, and he's no stranger to Halifax. He worked in Lower Sackville. Halifax beats in his heart. His family's here. He lives here. He's come back for sort of the third time. So he's a great supporter of Halifax. It's often helpful to think of the RCMP as a wind chime. So at the top of the wind chime, just like the chief administration officer or the mayor, we have the commanding officer, and underneath him, we have a criminal operations officer on the contract side. And that's Chief Superintendent Sue Black. Some of you have met Sue at different functions. And her job is to harmonize policing all over arguably the province, right? And then we have a federal side. And the federal side is Superintendent Jason Popick. And Jason Popick also worked in Lower Sackville and deals extensively with our brothers and sisters in policing on the municipal side all over the province for organized crime issues. So, for example, back in the summer, there was a significant takedown that included Homeland Security, and they were able to take an organized crime group that was transitioning drugs all the way up through the northern states and with a footprint into Canada. And some of the intelligence that was derived out of Nova Scotia helped break that gang. So if you think of that wind chime analogy, then underneath the commanding officer, we also have a senior officer in Halifax, a senior officer for Northern Nova Scotia, and for Southwest Nova. So then, just like HRM, we have internal areas such as finance or real corporate property folks that look after a building. We have a whole system that's developed over the last 150 years. So why is that relevant? That's relevant because there's an expectation on us to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars and good stewards of the people that we're entrusted with, the information and tools and so on. So we have a whole different number of committees that the senior management team is constantly sort of dealing and talking with. So, for example, HR staffing, we're actually staffed very well. If you look back over the last year or 2 years, there's lots of discussions about RCMP vacancies. Specific to Halifax Regional Detachment, essentially we have a name for every position that we have. They might be being transferred in, or it might be vacant because of a promotional process. But for the 4 positions that council, with the support of the police board last year funded, 1 is in place in December and 3 are expected to be operational in January. Right? So just the mobility of people coming and going, but that's why we have this dedicated HR staffing team that we work with all the time, people moving to and fro. The critical piece for us is we do have a senior division executive committee where all of us as senior officers gather to look at the priorities in Nova Scotia. And I would be, for lack of a better word, your voice in to make sure that Halifax region municipality is getting the best support we can from all our other partners. So this might be of interest to the commission. This is a data sourced from the Chief Financial Officer's area. And so we're not necessarily best with graphs, so bear with me, but what you see in the bottom is a comparator of expenditures for the RCMP by HRM contrasted to the total budget. So since 2014, and the Chief Financial Officer would have the exact data if that's interested, but it stayed between 2.7% to about 2.9% of the total expenditures of the municipality. So when we're talking about police costs for the RCMP side, our costs, yes, there's some incremental changes, but in terms of expenditures against the total of the municipality, we've stayed fairly stable. And you can also see the population growth that's being projected. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff too in a minute to talk us through a few slides. So, Jeff.
Thank you, sir. Madam Chair and fellow commissioners, good evening. Some of these metrics you've seen in previous presentations. This one here speaks to Halifax Regional Detachment's calls for service, and it's simply to demonstrate from 2018 to 2022 inclusive, there's a linear. Though there's some fluctuations in the volume of calls, you can see the dotted line shows a linear increase, as mentioned by Chief McLean and the Chief Superintendent Christie in previous presentations. Chief McLean spoke a little bit about pop to cop statistics, and we are all aware of the inherent interpretations that we must bear in mind when we're talking about pop to cop and the previous discussions in previous years and administrations on that. This particular chart shows from 2014 to present in Halifax Regional Detachment per 100,000 people population. So you could see clearly looking at the RCMP numbers, the significant decrease in numbers from 2014 to present in pop to cop. Chief McLean spoke to other jurisdictions in the country and also the unique nature of our relationship with HRP here in HRM and how we have to take a hard look at those numbers. As we mentioned previously, so Chief Superintendent Christie just alluded to the top line, the 4 FTEs that we requested in the last fiscal. As he said, one is in place in December and the other 3 are expected in January of 2024. Our ask for additional resources for the coming fiscal is 7 regular member FTEs. Incremental resources have been requested. We've also been engaging with the province, Nova Scotia Justice, for enhancements to our public service support team, which will support those members and support our frontline resources in our multi-year financial plan, which you would have a copy of. Sure.
So this is where it gets into sort of the question about, you hear quite a bill for an RCMP employee. And we always use the example that one bill pays for the gas, buys the cars, the training, deals with the liability, deals with the property. It's that all-in-one cost. And it's always a question that we have experts such as the Chief Financial Officer and folks in the Department of Justice that can sort of break down that total cost. And in the business case, that would have been part of the record for the September meeting or submitted to the HRM was basically last year's costing. And the Chief Financial Officer would be in conversation as we speak with the Department of Justice about the prediction and hence how they're recommending escalation. It's interesting though for us when we look at the fleet, and I'm going to switch into a few things such as physical examples here. We celebrated the opening of a great police station, police office in Middle Musquodoboit. If you look closely to the left, you might see Councillor Kathy Daigle-Gammon, you might see the Chief Administration Officer, and you might see the Chair of the Police Board who happened to join us that day in the picture. You know, a footprint is so important for quality. It's important to make sure that police services and the folks that may or may not have the same access to travel but need a criminal records checks can show up. It's important that a victim that needs to speak to somebody can show up. So through this, we have a number of buildings, and the all-in-one cost contributes to that. And so we have sort of a real capital cycle where the senior management teams work with the real property people to look at our infrastructure and try and determine what needs to be maintained. So a lot of people don't think that policing requires housing, but the fact of the matter is in remote communities, often it's important. It contributes to making sure we have members that can be on call and respond after hours. And so we actually maintain 6 homes. Members do pay a prorated fee for employees when they occupy that, similar to the Canadian Forces. It falls under a whole big rigmarole structured, so they do pay towards that. But it is a fee, it is a service, it's a presence, again, that the all-in-one cost contributes to. So we buy lots of cars. At the bottom is our small skiff, but it does have a presence and can be out in some events. You can see there's a small side-by-side, and of course, police cars. So every year, we're always evergreening our fleet, just like the municipality or other business lines are. What's the amount of cars that we need to work through? So the all-in-one cost is simply that. HRM is not so much buying our fleet from a sort of inside process. Again, it's all bundled within. So the radio that goes in that police car, the shield that goes in that police car, all that kind of support is within the cost. So what are some of the things, again, from a technology perspective that's always changing? So technology today, a few days ago, we met with some leaders from our national team, but body-worn cameras. So we're currently, validating a second vendor to make sure that the delivery will actually meet operational needs. And the first test, we talked about probably in October when Commissioner Blackburn brought it up, the first vendor didn't pass sort of the field test. Digital evidence management, Blue Force tracking. So Blue Force tracking is something that came out of the Moncton review by Alphonse McNeil, who's of course a good Cape Bretoner. Blue Force tracking is a app that can be on the phones. So every RCMP officer, if they're signed into their phone, can be seen. So again, if members are deploying in a rainy night or a stormy night or any time of the day, that we have supervisors that can see their location to make sure that those members are coordinated for their deployment. That reduces the risk of a blue on blue, some type of negative event between members in case of a use of force exchange. But that technology, we're able to leverage that as a national family and provide that to the folks in the field. The mobile command post is no stranger to those of you that were around during the wildfires. So that's a brand new command post that we can deploy that can replicate from a business continuity planning exercise, an office that may be wiped out due to storm damage or not. We can put that command post there and have a readily accessible area for employees to work out of. So national initiatives, and just in the interest of time, we won't go through them all, but the all-in-one cost covers a number of things. So we're not talking tonight about the extended range impact weapon, but imagine sort of like a Nerf gun, a disabling weapon that can be discharged at a person providing a lethal risk to someone else. And so we're in the, whether it's SAT equipment, whether it's our pistol replacement, whether it's the armored tactical vehicle that will support the deployment of emergency response team members. Those are all assets that we have access to, generally real time. The helicopter below, we used the helicopter during the wildfires a few days after, or during the floods, pardon me, to get the mayor and the chief administration officer up for an aerial tour to see the risk and impact to different devastated areas in terms of recovery. So we can leverage those physical assets and skilled teams, because when we think of the helicopter, we also have to have a pilot. We also have a mechanic. And we bundle those shared services up in such a way that we all have some access to them. Of course, it's not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it is nonetheless a great asset to have available. I'll turn it over to Jeff for this slide, just for this one.
Thanks, sir. Just another note on the body worn cameras, just for your information, that field test with the second vendor is going to begin in December of this year using the same detachments and areas that we used before to make it consistent. If all is successful, the intended rollout is in the fiscal year of 24-25. And we're also working closely with our partners at Halifax Regional Police and their senior management team to keep them updated on progress with that body worn camera program on a national level. And just one comment on the WinTAC, the Blue Force tracking, Chief Superintendent Krisky mentioned about our ability to track people on cell phones. And we can zoom in satellite imagery right in on top of a house, and we can see exactly where our members are for situational awareness. From a dispatch perspective, it's an incredible tool. Capital planning in H Division is always underway. Existing building infrastructure renewal and renovation. So that's a national program that looks at our facilities throughout the country and throughout the province. For instance, renovations to those of you who've been in Lower Sackville lately, there's a building out back it's a new Lower Sackville exhibit storage facility that we modernized over the past year. And we are kitting that up and putting processes in place to better able to manage our exhibit process out there. Fleet replacements, as the chief mentioned, are ongoing. Technology refreshments from a national level and support from national and from divisional level in Dartmouth, the headquarters. And looking toward the future, using existing models that we currently have in the North Preston office, where we have our community office situated directly in an HRM facility. And there's possibilities that we may have mentioned in here before about going forward and looking at other communities within HRM where we could have future growth at minimal cost.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just wrap up. There's two pictures there of community consultation on the right, and the team deploying with some of Bill Moore's team and the community compliance officers and under Chief Stubing, the fire truck in the background for the Tantallon area wildfires. It's a conversation. It's always a conversation around the level of service delivery that we as the RCMP can provide to the municipality. So some of these discussions we hosted, for example, the police chair and Councillor Iona Stoddard to the North Preston office. And any of the board that would like to see that kind of a satellite office would be welcome to visit. And so these are some of the things that come with that discussion about the RCMP being part of the policing story for your community. Welcome any questions, but that would end the presentation subject to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. And Jeff, any questions for them before we get into our debate on budget? Okay, seeing none, I will need a motion from the floor. We're just waiting for that to get printed out by the clerks. Shane has to warm up. It must be as old as I am. Here we go. Commissioner Blackburn, I understand you're going to be putting that motion on the floor. We'll need a seconder.
All right, Madam Chair, I move that the Board of Police Commissioners for the Halifax Regional Municipality recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve the Halifax District Royal Canadian Mounted Police resource request for 7 additional police officer full-time equivalents, FTEs, which includes the following positions. A, 1 assistant detachment commander, superintendent. B, 2 intimate partner violence investigators, constable. And C, 4 general duty investigators, constable for the 24-25 fiscal year. I so move.
Seconded by Commissioner Thomas. Would you like to speak to that, Commissioner Blackburn?
No, I'm good. I just, good with the ask and just, interested to hear what others are thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone like? Chief?
Chair, if I may, with regards to B, there is a possibility that when we talk about the constable, 2 constable positions with our organ classification people, that could become 1 corporal and a constable, based on a supervisor and an investigator. So I don't think that changes sort of the narrative, but there is a 25% chance once they became, if council voted to support that, I wouldn't want to be perceived as misleading the board, but there's a chance it could be a constable and a corporal or 2 constables.
Thank you. Perhaps Andrew, you can just delete the constable and then it won't be. Sure. Okay, do we have any other speakers?
Can we break it up the same way? Okay.
Yeah, we can break it up the same way, yeah. Is that yes, and this is this is a motion for council consideration, yeah, okay. Just thinking of the advisory role we play. Okay. So Lisa, would you, or Commissioner Blackburn, would you like to put the motion on the floor for A?
All right, sure. I move A, accept 1 assistant detachment commander at the superintendent level.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Commissioner Smith. Any debate? So I call the question. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Yeah, 3-2. Yeah. Commissioner Blackburn, would you like to put forward number B?
Sure,
B.
I'll move B, that we accept 2 intimate partner violence investigators for the 2024-25 fiscal year. I so move.
The seconder? Seconded by Commissioner Smith. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. And C, Commissioner Blackburn?
Sure, I'll move C, that we approve 4 general duty investigators at the constable level for the 2024-25 fiscal year. I so move.
And is there a seconder? Commissioner Thomas seconds. Any debate? Okay, call the question. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. That motion failed. So,
Did you vote, Chair?
yeah, but I'm the tiebreaker, so even if I did vote, I can vote. I vote in favor of it, but it makes it 3-3, but 4, because Yemi's not here, it's a negative.
So it's a negative. It's defeated.
Defeated. Yeah, it was defeated, yeah. Just 1 second. Marty.
Okay, so just to remind the board of where we are with this, there's no provision either in the act, right, or the bylaw, right, for this board to approve, right, a budget request from the RCMP. However, traditionally, this is not the first time that the board has made a recommendation to council. You can make whatever recommendation you want to council at any time you want. So just to make that clear in terms of this matter going forward, it's wholly really within the discretion of council, both at the start and the finish, but they can certainly look at your recommendations. So just that so the board understands that. So I think what we have here is you voted on the 3 of them, and I think probably we should have a general motion overall.
Mm-hmm.
to approve this as amended by those votes?
As the recommendation.
So,
Well, there's a,
Well, I think it's on the
it's
floor.
already on the
It's already
floor
on the
because
floor,
by
so we
virtue of
just
the
need-
fact that it was on and then we amended it.
yeah, so we just need an overarching,
Any further
Vote.
debate on that? Okay, call the question. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay.
okay, it's passed.
It's passed.
Okay, Commissioner, no, we're not getting any updates. Can we defer the updates?
Yeah, we'll defer